I'm Joe Devine and welcome to Whiteboard Football Extra. Today I'm joined by Nick Miller to talk about Mino Raiola and the role of agents or super agents in modern football. We spoke for 20-25 minutes or so, and at the end of the podcast as well, Danny Sayers drops in a little update from the Netherlands. He's out there with Matt covering the tournament for us and making some beautiful videos. So if you haven't seen any of them, please do go to our YouTube channel and check them out. There should be 2 or 3 up there now, but from a videography point of view, I think they're absolutely gorgeous, personally. So please do go and check them out. Also, if you can, this is my regular plea for you to leave a positive review and or comment on iTunes or Soundcloud or YouTube or wherever you're listening to the podcast. It really does help us. We're trying to get as many people to listen to it as possible, so that'd be fantastic. Our World Cup series over the summer is now officially over. You've probably noticed we've started making Premier League and club-related football videos again. So the Lukaku tactics video we put out last week, that's up there if you guys haven't seen that and want to watch it. Tomorrow, I think we're putting up a tactics video on Jurgen Klopp's Liverpool and counter-pressing. So that was quite interesting to make. But I hope you enjoyed the podcast. Thanks for the download, and we'll see you again next week. Most people's first thought on the topic of football agents tends to be rather negative, but for those of us maybe less traversed in the ways of football agents, Nick, can you just give us a brief description of their general role?
Well, obviously the kind of traditional role of an agent is to look after a player's contract, to make sure he's not being taken advantage of by rich football clubs and to get them the best deal possible. But recently, probably in the last kind of 15, 20 years or so, they've evolved into sort of kind of all-purpose kind of high-powered PAs. You'll often hear agents describe themselves as sort of a combination of minders, financial advisors, and sort of pseudo-psychiatrists at some point as well. Agents will often be the people that a player will go to if he's having confidence problems, or he's having problems with someone in his team or a manager or anything like that, and the agent will either just be a sounding board for those kind of things, or they might be able to do something about it as well. And on a kind of silly basic level, you'll often hear them talking about players who will call them up asking for advice on the most sort of basic of human problems. For example, how to pay bills, find them a new house, how to cook a meal, anything like that. I think I mentioned in the Raiola piece that Mario Balotelli once called him up to inform Raiola that his house was on fire, and Raiola calmly advised him to call the fire brigade. So they're sort of their role has definitely evolved from purely financial and contractual advisors to kind of pseudo life gurus for young men who are thrown into a world with a lot of money but not a lot of life experience to know what to do with that money.
It's interesting that the way that you put it there as well, because one of the other things that brings to mind those sorts of responsibilities is parenting, and in some ways I guess they're kind of pseudo parents almost for young players, which is one of the reasons why I think a lot of supporters or observers or journalists can be sceptical of an agent's role, because obviously if they're providing those sort of basic comforts or responsibilities for people, that's not necessarily a bad thing. But as we all know, I think with parenting, what comes with those other responsibilities is also quite a lot of trust and quite a lot of power over people if they're young, particularly, and if they are playing in a world of adults. I think that gives agents who may or may not have nefarious agendas quite a lot of power over kids in a way that maybe you wouldn't want them to have. It's interesting that we talk about that as well, because Mino Raiola, for whom you wrote the script for our recent video, one of the themes that stuck with me from that was the idea that Raiola treats his clients as a family. He seems to be the archetypal, I suppose, character within this idea that agents are acting now beyond what their original role was intended for, not just legal aids, but also, personal aids as well, I suppose. And there really does seem to be, from the quotes that you used, an emotional connection between Raiola and his clients that I hadn't really expected before. I didn't know loads about him, to be honest. I knew who his clients were, but I didn't know much about his life story. And given that, and the fact that, whenever large sums of money are involved in in deals, the majority of supporters tend to make quite harsh judgments generally, and that goes for players as well as clubs and managers, mainly agents, I think. Do you think it's possible that agents get a bad rap, or at least a disproportionately bad rap, or is that, am I inventing that?
It's possible that that's the bad reputation is disproportionate, mainly because your average fan will only see the sort of public role of the agent, which more often than not is moving players around and demanding, in many cases, large sums of money for doing so. It's inevitable that if this player X moves from your club and it turns out, or it seems that it's the agent that has been behind that move, then fans are going to have some kind of animosity towards them. I think we've reached the point where fans, while there is an obscene amount of money in the game, fans are broadly accepting that if anyone's going to get that money, it should be the players. Whereas if you hear of agents being paid millions and millions of pounds in fees for something that you're not quite sure exactly what they're doing, then I think it's inevitable that they will get a bad reputation and people will feel some kind of animosity towards them. I think that the one thing to mention is, as with most things, there are good agents and there are bad agents. There will be agents that you'll hear fairly horrific stories about, where they will prey on young and impressionable players, and in many cases relatively young and impressionable parents as well, and they will make promises that their player will, that if they sign with them, then this young player will be able to sign for large amounts of money with this club, but only they can do that, and this is because they want to get that power and influence that we talked about earlier at the earliest stage possible. And at that stage, they might not make decisions for the player that are in the best interests of that player. They might just be purely financial. And I think this is one of the areas in which Raiola might get a bad reputation, because other than a couple of situations, he may earn a lot of money, and you may think that is an unjustified amount of money, but there aren't many situations in which his clients have made bad career moves. I think we'll go on to talk more specifically about Paul Pogba shortly, but Mario Balotelli is probably the outlier of his clients in many respects. He and Raiola, I think, has admitted that when Balotelli's move to Milan, when he left Manchester City, he shouldn't have done that. Obviously, he shouldn't have moved to Liverpool either, but that possibly was for other reasons. So while there are many kind of legitimate criticisms of Raiola, I'm not sure that being a bad agent in that respect is one of them.
No, I agree, and I think as well Balotelli is an interesting example, because, as you say, he runs very hot and cold on the field, and whilst Raiola's influence is going to exert a certain amount of control, there's not really much he can do if Balotelli isn't making it on the pitch. So to a certain extent, a player's moves are as well. Even if they have a very talented agent or a very well connected agent, a player's moves are still mostly dictated by how well they're performing. I wanted to pick up on something you were saying earlier as well about agents making a lot of money on big deals. It's interesting because last week on the podcast I spoke to Seb Stafford-Bloor about Daniel Levy saying that the Premier League's club spending was unsustainable and that these, figures are sort of surreally high now. And one of the things that Seb said was that the figures themselves are kind of becoming the offensive thing rather than, your example was that a player might move away from your club, and the one of the reasons given might be that the agent was agitating for a move, and that might be the reason that that agent is now disliked. But I think now that we're in a situation where the amount of money being spent on football is absurd, really, to put it lightly, even. It's inevitable that an agent is going to make a lot of money if they have a high-profile client. And I think one of the sort of common conceptions about agents as well is that they're sort of parasitical. In fact, I was in the pub the other day chatting with some friends about people applying for jobs and applying for work, and all of them at some point in their past had used an agency to apply for jobs, even like state jobs. So a friend of mine works at the British Museum, but he originally got that job through an agency. He's now a permanent member of staff, but the British Museum had to buy him off the agency like he was a sort of slave. And that's interesting to me because that is a publicly funded museum, and that is money that's directly goes out of the public purse into the private sector. Really, for what reason? So that they don't have to spend a bit more time advertising in the Guardian, for example, for people to apply for jobs. I mean, I suppose the whole purpose of an agency, beyond the kind of nefarious means of interesting lack of rights and stuff like that, is to make it easier to hire people or multiple people in one go. That really seems to be the only reason. And an agent in the football realm, from a legal point of view, does seem to occupy the same sort of potentially unnecessary role. Of course, footballers would need to have legal representation, but I'm pretty certain that they'll also be working with lawyers. I don't think the agent is necessarily the be-all and end-all of all contractual agreements, maybe the negotiation stage. So I think, generally speaking, it is one of those roles that maybe just seems sort of unnecessary, a kind of hated middleman. I think that is one of the areas in which people have legitimate concerns, is that I won't kind of pick out an individual transfer, but because we don't know the ins and outs of all these deals, but there will be some transfers where the selling club wants to sell, the buying club wants to buy, and the player wants to move. So in that, and then still in those situations, an agent will take a large commission, or whatever you want to call it, and you kind of wonder what on earth he has done to earn this amount of money. In fact, the one example from years and years ago that springs to mind is when Harry Keel went to Liverpool from Leeds. He had an agent called Bernie Mandich, who Leeds obviously needed to sell because they were in dire. This is kind of towards the start of their real dire financial problems. Keel wanted to move to Liverpool. Liverpool wanted the player, and he took £2 million. He called it a success fee, and people were just kind of probably quite legitimately baffled as to what exactly he'd done to earn that money. Yeah, it's a bizarre thing, and as I said, I think it's seemingly unnecessary in some cases, although obviously not in all. Let's revisit the situation between Raiola and Sir Alex Ferguson, because obviously with Manchester United paying Juventus £89 million for the return of Paul Pogba, there's the potential suggestion of eggs and faces, maybe, Nick. From Ferguson's point of view, he clearly didn't want to be extorted for an unproven youth player, or I suppose unproven at the time, and he took an immediate disliking to Raiola. Ferguson's actions, whilst potentially, retrospectively incorrect, they might be morally at least upheld by a majority of fans who also, hold that view of agents as industry parasites, as we've suggested. But in your Raiola video, you take you sort of take a look from the other perspective, because Raiola clearly made a lot of money from Pogba's transfers. But you could definitely argue, and I think you've already touched on it, that Pogba directly benefited from the move, and also to take take that one step further as well. Sir Alex Ferguson is obviously going to have the support of a lot of supporters, and Raiola, as the agent of Pogba, doesn't have his own fan base to sort of support him in his actions. The club are going to want to get the best deal possible, and I think what's interesting about the rise of agents, or super agents, I suppose, in modern football, is that there's so much hate directed towards them and directed towards player power, that we forget about things like why the Bosman ruling was introduced, or we forget that clubs have their own agendas, that if they could get away with it, they would do things that would be considered just as bad.
Yeah, absolutely. And the thing about the Pogba move is, obviously he went to Juventus, he did very well, but the other thing to consider is that he left United in 2012. A year later, Ferguson had retired. So if Pogba had stayed at United, he would have had a season where he was maybe in and out of the team, and then he would have been managed by David Moyes. And that, as we know, that didn't go particularly well. And then Louis van Gaal, but as it was, he went to Juventus. He was, I think, he almost immediately a member of the first team, and he won a number of league titles, got to the Champions League final, and ultimately came back to United on his own terms. It's inevitable that Ferguson is going to dislike Raiola initially because their personalities clash, but Pogba was probably, I was trying to think of another example for this, but he was probably the first player that left United under Ferguson that Ferguson didn't either desperately didn't want to lose, or could at least not see why he was leaving. Ronaldo is the obvious example a few years earlier, but I think Ferguson had sort of accepted that it was inevitable that Ronaldo was going to move to Real Madrid at some stage. But with Pogba, this was a brilliant young player who Ferguson wanted to keep, and he couldn't quite understand why this kid was leaving, other than because his agent had said he could get more money elsewhere. That's probably not. That's almost certainly not entirely fair, but you can certainly understand why Ferguson thought that.
And it's worth noting as well that amongst his clients, including Pogba, Henrik Mkhitaryan, Romelu Lukaku, Zlatan Ibrahimovic, he also represents Mario Balotelli, as we've said, and Balotelli is currently playing at Nice. Perhaps not quite at the same level as many of the other players that Raiola represents, and we've already sort of speculated that he might be the outlier there. But one of the ways that he does fit the bill is when it comes to attitude, as Raiola's clients, or many of them, all seem to have, as you note in the video, brash attitudes, are often outspoken or outgoing, to put it lightly. And you say in the video that Raiola actually encourages his clients to be that way. What do you think about that, and what do you think that the benefit of that is?
I think the classic example of that is Lukaku, because if you remember when he first signed for Chelsea, he was very kind of almost deferential towards a club. He's talking about idolising Didier Drogba and having his posters on his wall and so on. But now, if you see Lukaku being interviewed, or certainly before, just in the kind of weeks and months leading up to his move to United, he was very kind of outspoken and kind of brash and confident. And ultimately, that may have been part of the reason that he got this move, that he was very kind of vocal about wanting to leave Everton, and that sort of thing will inevitably help. Sometimes, in the view of agents such as Raiola, deals like this have to be sort of forced through. So I think that's one of the kind of reasons that he will encourage his players to be outwardly self-confident. But I think the thing with most of Raiola's clients, and again, Mario Balotelli is the sort of outlier here, is that he'll encourage them to be sort of brash and outgoing. But he'll also encourage them to work hard. The story about his first meeting with Ibrahimovic was he said he needed to sell his cars and sell his jewellery and get knuckle down and start working to improve himself as a player, because his performance at that stage wasn't good enough. So in that respect, his players are encouraged to have that outward self-confidence, but not sort of detriment to their play, and certainly you couldn't accuse most of them of being unprofessional.
We should mention that we've recorded this podcast a couple of weeks ahead of the date it is released, so we're not totally up to date on movements of players. As we know, things can happen very quickly in July and August, so everything could have changed already. We don't know. But I wonder, Nick, if we can expect really much else from Raiola this summer anyway. His clients seem to have in part dominated transfer speculation for most of the window so far. And I wonder if that actually might just be a reflection of how, in air quotes, active Raiola is during transfer windows, or whether, agitating and getting his clients talking and getting them in the press is a good way of getting them deals potentially if they did decide they wanted to move.
Yeah, I think that's entirely right. As for the kind of the rest of the summer, he might actually be quite quiet now, because I mean most of his clients are reasonably settled. Lukaku's obviously just moved. Balotelli just signed a new 1-year contract with Nice. Generally, after a kind of a period of
instability.
After a period of instability, Gianluigi Donnarumma's signed a new contract at Milan as well. There are a couple that you could still see some sort of movement on.
Ibrahimovic, he's in flux.
Yeah, but that's probably slightly a different thing, because obviously no one's going to sign him until he's proved that his knee is recovered. Yeah. Another of his players is Marco Verratti, who's sort of possibly agitating for a move away from PSG at the moment as well.
Is Barcelona the likely destination for him?
That's what it sounds like. Yeah, I cannot stress this enough. I don't have sources close to the deal, but from everything that's been written by people who know a great deal more about it than I do, it seems that Verratti wants specifically to go to Barcelona. And Raiola also has a young player called Moises Kean, who is on the books of Juventus, who he thinks is going to be the next kind of big thing. Whether he'll, presumably he won't be moving this summer, but you can expect to hear Raiola talking him up quite a lot as well.
Okay, and one final thing before we finish the podcast, Nick. Of course, we are not far from the beginning of the season now. Probably only a few days. I can't work out how 2 weeks ahead and I don't understand the calendar. But we can't be far from football beginning when this podcast is released. So a couple of very quick questions. Firstly, I'm going to put you on the spot and ask you what you think. Who you're backing, let's say, to do well this season in the Premier League. And secondly, I was going to ask you about Tottenham's transfer policy of no transfers, but then I thought 2 weeks, they may have bought the whole world by then, so let's leave that one out. The first question stands.
Well, the first question, it depends what you mean by backing. I desperately want Tottenham to do very well, if only because they are, as you say, at the moment, and this may all change, but at the moment they seem not to be following the route of everyone else by firing money around like it's out of a t-shirt cannon, and that's I don't know if this sounds a bit kind of old man watching the football, but that is quite refreshing.
It does sound old man watching the football, Nick.
Yeah. Oh well, I'll embrace it. As for who I think will do well, I don't know. Probably Manchester City. They have an absolutely terrifying selection of forwards. I'm not sure.
I sense lackluster in your response. That I feel like you don't care that Manchester City are going to do well. Is that fair?
It's not that I don't care that Manchester City are going to do well. It's just that I am very reticent about giving predictions of any description, because it's a fool's game and it's almost impossible to do.
That's why I've asked you. That's why it's mainly fun for me.
Yeah.
But Nick, old man in the chair watching football, thank you very much for joining us today. I do appreciate that, and we'll speak to you again soon.
Thanks, Joe.
Hey guys, Ted Joe, hope everyone is well. Danny, coming at you from the Netherlands again. Since I last spoke to you, we have seen England's second group game of the tournament, and I'm sat in my apartment currently at the time of recording this, and we're about to go to England's final group game of the tournament against Portugal in Tilburg. You're going to be listening to this on the Monday, so it's a bit confusing. If all goes to plan today, basically, as long as England don't lose significantly, then last night, England should have played their quarter-final game. So at the point you're listening to this now, we have uploaded our second and third episode of our trip. So if you haven't given them a watch and you're interested in it, it'd be greatly appreciated if you do. We should also have another live stream or two that we've done during the games. So that should all be up on the channel now. Going forward this week, we're going to be going to the quarterfinal, semi-final and final of the tournament, regardless of how well England do. So we'll be releasing a video this upcoming weekend covering the first stage of that. And then the following weekend, we'll do our final video covering the final. And throughout all that, we're going to continue exploring the country. The Netherlands is... it's so big. I don't know where to go, but I think we're going to definitely try and hit up Amsterdam. Of course we have to. We went to Rotterdam yesterday. We're going to go again today. That should be in the video that's been uploaded. We've got plenty of other places we want to see and plenty of other things we want to do, and we're going to be doing some more live streams throughout this week as well, so make sure you keep your eye on the channel to see them. Let us know whether or not you like the live streams, because we could look at implementing them on the channel in the future in other aspects. So that'd be really fun to do. But just wanted to give you a quick update as to where we were since we last spoke. And then I'll be back on the podcast probably next Monday, at which point the tournament would have been over. So it's all come around really quickly. But yeah, that's where we are. Just go onto the playlist link on the channel if you want to keep up to date. And if you want a real-time up-to-date, follow me on Twitter, @Danny_Sayers. That is the best place to follow all my photos, updates, tweets, everything. So, yeah, thank you guys for listening. I hope you're having a wonderful Monday. I hope Joe's soothing voice is starting your week off in the right way. And I will hopefully see you on the videos soon, or if not, see you next week on the podcast.